Welcome to the BrightWord Books podcast. BrightWord is a leading platform for diverse storytelling, where voices from all backgrounds can share their unique narratives and connect with readers from around the world. Follow our regular podcast updates, where we strive to foster a literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature.
Hello, welcome everyone to the BrightWord Books podcast, where we spotlight or put the spotlight on inspiring authors and the powerful message behind their work. I am your host, Winston, and today we are honored to welcome the author, Tracy Emerick. Now, he's a passionate thinker, he's a storyteller, and a voice for faith-based reflection and purpose. In this episode, we'll be exploring Tracy's latest book, the app named Constant Courage, Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesus Christ. It's a deeply reflective work that draws meaningful parallels between two of history's most courageous and transformative figures. Throughout this conversation, we will unpack what it means to live with an unwavering moral courage, the kind that resists violence, uplifts the oppressed, and dares to love even in the face of hate. From the streets, from the palpable protests from the King and the Christ, both chose a path that demands sacrifice, conviction, and boundless grace. We will talk to Tracy about how this book came to be, how its message continues to resonate today, and how each of us might live with a bit more of that same constant courage. So without further ado, let's dive in and welcome our guest. Hello, sir.
Hello, good to be here.
Good to have you here. How are you today? How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you.
Lovely. And how's the family?
Well, doing fine. They're all off to the winds, you know.
I like how that fine. So it told a lot of stories.
Well, no news is good news.
Right. So, sir, I want to jump right into talking about the book, but I want to start with something that is of interest of mine, to be honest with you. It's the fact that the book Constant Courage, it draws a powerful connection between two transformative figures.
Yes.
Since the completion of the book itself, has your view on their courage evolved in any unexpected way?
Has it evolved in an unexpected way?
Right, as you
Well, I
were
think
completing the book.
the most unexpected way is I think in writing the book, it changed my life.
Right.
So that's been the most unexpected because this is one of four books. Each book has had some effect, and this one has had a profound effect
Right.
of my own attitudes. 'Cause doing the research and then drawing the comparisons, you can't help but get drawn into it. And so once you get drawn into it, you say, well, where do I stand on this? You know, what are my beliefs? And, you know, do
Right.
I have the courage of my convictions, or, you know, do I have round heels and fall over easily? So part of this was kind of a self-awareness opportunity. And maybe that was the message for me is
Right.
listen to what you're writing. So
Right.
be a good student of yourself.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the most profound effect, and I've noticed in my daily dealings, I'm much more calm. I'm
Right.
much less aggressive. I'm much more ponderous.
hmm
I listen harder. Uh, so it has had a profound effect in a lot of little ways. You
Right.
know,
Right.
it's not like a lightning bolt, but it sure is a lot of little shocks.
Right. But eventually it charged up the battery, so that's what you got.
You got that one right. Very good metaphor. Yep.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for complimenting my metaphor. But you said something very interesting there. You said, as you were doing the research, you were drawing comparisons. And I'm very interested in that. What led you to bring these two figures together in one narrative?
Okay. Well, all four of my books combined an earthling, if you will, with
hmm
Jesus Christ. And I went down this path because I felt like the Christian church had kind of missed the mark on communicating Jesus as a person.
Right.
They've set him up as a deity, but he wasn't personified in the same sense. So I've written four
Hmm.
books to try to look at aspects of Jesus that say, hey, he's just a regular guy, but he had very strong beliefs and beliefs enough that he died for them,
Right.
as did Martin Luther King. So that was part of my motivation for all the books, was to say, look at Jesus as a human and also look at the deity you have within yourself
Right.
in order to improve yourself. So that was the overall strategy for the four books.
Hmm.
When I got to this one, it was very real for me because I grew up during the marching days of Martin Luther King. I
Right.
remember this was black and white television days, but I remember seeing the Selma March on the news. As a youth, I didn't really know what I was looking at. I just saw a
Hmm.
bunch of people coming across a bridge, and I thought, well, what's that kind of parade?
Right.
But then, as I got older and I got more knowledgeable about what the purpose was, and then you had the speech on the steps in Washington, the "I Have a Dream"
Right.
speech.
Hmm.
That's became part of history. So it was a little bit of personal experience, not knowing I was experiencing anything that great, but then later on, kind of rolling it to the fabric of our country and of
Right.
our history. So it became much more powerful. So that I guess that's part of the uniqueness of this, because of all the four books, Martin Luther King and Jesus had the best parallels. I mean,
Right.
they were just identical characters, if you will, marching down the same path with the same conclusion.
Hmm.
So it was probably the easier book to write in that sense, because I was writing about coaches and other things, and you have to kind of stretch reality a tad every now and again to make the metaphors, and the
Right.
analogy work. In this particular book, it was simple because they were there, in
Right.
their
Right.
beliefs, in what they did, how they acted, and their foundation, which was unshakable. And I think that's what I tried to communicate in the book, was the profound effect Jesus had over his disciples, and they couldn't get it up to the last minute. They
Hmm.
never really got it. I don't
Right.
think they really understood his love your neighbor as yourself.
Hmm.
I don't think they really understood it until after he was gone, because they were rebellious at the last minute. When he was
Right.
arrested. So it's like he lived as he said he did. It wasn't just a speech. It wasn't just a sermon.
Right.
It was how he lived. And you asked me earlier, what's been profound about it. That's what's been profound is, gosh, if he did it and Martin Luther King Jr. did it,
Right.
I can certainly give it a try. So
Absolutely.
I have to say my life's a lot more mellow now than it used to be,
Right.
because
Right.
I have been in politics in the U.S. and it does get very contentious. But now I've kind of learned to say, well, contention is good for discussion, but it's not good for emotion.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so,
Right.
so I think that's where the courage comes from, is to have the courage to suppress your own uh, emotions and
Hmm.
have and reach out with understanding rather than response.
Right. Right. Yeah, contention has a time and a place, sort of. It's a good thing. It's not inherently a bad thing. It just has a time and a place. In a room
Correct.
where businessmen are talking, I mean, they're working out a deal and everyone is seeking the best for them. And so contention there only works for the purpose of that meeting. But contention should not be, for example, on the dinner table, because that's when
Right.
you're supposed to be relaxing, you're with your family, and everything should be whatever the opposite of contention is. That's
Right.
what should be
Right.
the mood, right? But also there is the story goes that the day Martin Luther King died, the FBI told him that if you go out there, you will be assassinated.
Yes.
We have the information, we don't know where it's coming from, but you will be assassinated. You will die if you go out there. And he still did that, still went out there, still did the speech, still gathered the masses, still did everything because he believed in the message so much, his message so much that he was willing to die for it,
Yes.
which is a parallel that you talk about in the book with um, the Lord Jesus Christ. And also, the book also highlights another thing, a mutual commitment to nonviolence. I want to ask you, how do you see that courage to resist retaliation as a radical and transformative act?
Well, Martin Luther King was very emphatic with his followers that
Mm,
they not push back no matter what happened, and he lived up to the statement because he did have some, I'll call them rebels, if you will. He did have
hmm
some people who didn't pay attention to him and did push back, and he let them go. He said, "You don't belong here." So he showed his followers, uh, I really mean it. This is
hmm
this isn't a joke. And clearly Jesus was of the same mind. But like I said, I think his disciples, uh, I think they had their final moment was when he was arrested, and
hmm
even though they were foretold of what was going to happen, when it really happened, I don't know that they were really ready for it. Where Martin Luther King had been telling his followers repeatedly, nonviolence, nonviolence, Mahatma Gandhi approach,
hmm
take it and smile and move on. Uh, Even though Jesus was saying along the same line, I don't, like I said earlier, I don't know that his disciples really caught on
Right,
until he was arrested, and then we know what happens after that.
right.
But both of them were steadfast in both verbiage and in demonstration of their own lives.
Right. And most people, their first reaction to being hurt is retaliation. That's just pretty much the first thing most people go to.
Yes.
Very rarely do you find people who sort of resist that urge to make an improvised action and retaliate immediately and maybe think about it a little bit more. But both men, both figures that you talk about, they did something that we would consider even the opposite of retaliation, which is having love for their enemies. And that is truly something wondrous. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I think if we look at in our own lives, if we look
Mm,
at people that we felt have wronged us, if we say to ourselves or to them, I really don't like what you did, but I forgive you and I love you.
hmm
That's very freeing, because what that does is it takes the energy you have inside and lets it go. Because if you do have a dislike or more, I mean, if you really
hmm
are hurt in some way, if you don't let it go, then you're going to live with it.
Right,
So part of that lifestyle, if you will, and part of the courage is to say, I don't particularly like what you did, but I love you just the same.
right,
And that actually, for most people, that's very upsetting when you say that to someone that you've been having a dialogue with, and you say, we don't agree with each other, but we'll continue to be friends, and I do love you.
right,
It's almost like it's the end of the conversation. Because
right.
if you
Yeah,
want to reinvent the conflict, then they didn't get your message.
right, right,
So I mean, I've used that myself of late, maybe the last 4 or 5 years, and I found I sleep much better.
right, right,
If you go to bed with angst on your heart, you're going to think about it, and it's going to wake you up in the middle of the night. But if you don't take that to bed with you, you sleep like a baby.
right. So you sleep a lot lighter.
Yes.
Yeah. But today, I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not notice how polarized the world is. I mean, even probably under the rock, the bugs are polarized as well, seeing how the state of the world is. And what do you think we can learn from these two figures on how to apply what we can apply to on our day-to-day life to avoid this kind of polarization?
Well, I think part of it is learning to understand both sides of a discussion.
Hmm.
Uh, I think our news media and the talk shows and all of the, I'll call talking heads, no matter where what media they're using, they tried to draw distinctions. Everything is always the distinction between this group and that group, this
Hmm.
country, this philosophy, that philosophy, rather than saying, 99% of what they both believe is the same thing, but we have
Right.
1% where we have conflict. So then if we kind of address what's the conflict point and not leave the sides out of it,
Hmm.
uh, you can see an issue a lot better. But
Right.
once you start getting all the, like I said earlier, the emotions and uh, what would be the right word when you don't forgive people, when you hold animosity, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
and it seems to feed on itself, and once you get to a point, it seems like the only outcome is going to be negative.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so you have to have the courage. We have to have the courage to absorb the negativity and move on,
Right.
uh,
Right.
uh, but still be willing to listen. Because
Hmm.
moving on doesn't mean ignoring.
Right.
Unfortunately, it means listening more, a little harder,
Right.
to see, what are our common issues that we can build on, rather than what are our contentious issues that we can hate on.
True. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, sometimes people sort of take the one thing they disagree about with the person, and they make that person that whole thing. It's
The whole
just
world.
from one, yeah,
Yeah,
the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, back to the figures we were talking about. They also each spread their message to anyone who would listen.
Yes.
And regardless of the background, they were willing to reach all people. What do you think that teaches us about one, leadership and also inclusivity?
Well, I think the model of both. There's a point of contrast here where Jesus didn't have the media.
Mm,
So his uh, legacy, if you will, was carried on verbally. There weren't marches across the bridge in Selma, to be
hmm.
replayed. So he didn't
Right.
have the media. The one thing Martin Luther King did, he was a master of media. He knew how to draw the media in to have his approach in the best light. He
Hmm.
did a great job of that. Well, Jesus did the same thing, but he did it one by one by one by one. He
Right.
did have Sermon on the Mount. He did have, different groups and more the parables and everything, but he really he excelled on one to one. I mean, the woman at the well is an example of a man of that era didn't approach a woman unaccompanied, and she was also a Samaritan, and he was a Jew, and they weren't supposed to be talking to each other because they didn't like each other. I mean,
Mm,
everything was wrong, but he made it work. And he also said one time when the disciples were trying to keep the children away from him because, oh, they're making too much noise, whatever, like kids do. And he said, bring the children to me. So he demonstrated his ability to reach out, to be understanding, and to love
mm.
other people, regardless of whether they were Samaritan or a Jew or whatever. And that had to rub off as demonstration for his disciples. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
they knew everything he was doing wrong, but they didn't run up and grab him and drag him away. They observed what he was doing, and I think later on, when they had their opportunity, then they mimicked him, which
Right.
is kind of like what he was expecting to have happen, and it did. So now we have, 1.2 billion Christians, and we're still all learning and trying to follow the same examples.
Right, right, absolutely. I want to go back to something similar to the first question that I asked you. At first, I asked you what made you maybe something that completely changed you. But I want to also know about what challenged your own understanding when doing research of this book. Was your faith challenged, ju your sense of justice, your courage, which is a big theme here? What would you say you got challenged by
Well, I
as you were
think
writing this book?
I think the biggest challenge was doing the research on Martin Luther King and looking at the insurmountable odds he was fighting,
Right.
because the media of my youth certainly didn't draw that distinction, and
Hmm.
later on it was still kind of obscured. But talking about a stacked deck against you, I mean, he had laws against him. It wasn't just
Right.
attitudes. The laws said you can't do this, you can't do that, and there will be segregation, and you can't use this water fountain, and you can't go to these schools. I mean,
Right.
so he was stacked up against what in most people's mind would be insurmountable odds.
Mm.
He had the law against him, he had the law enforcement against him, and he had popular opinion not on his side. I don't know if they were against him, but they weren't necessarily on his side.
Right.
So when I look at what he was stacked up against, well, Jesus was also stacked up against, the Pharisees and the whole Jewish hierarchy,
Right.
plus the Romans, just for the fun of it, So he had insurmountable odds. But I think part of my research into Martin Luther King was really eye-opening as
Right.
to how steep the stairs he had to climb were. I don't know if I could have done that.
Right. Right. Is that a story that moved you when you were doing research about it?
Uh, I don't know if it was more accumulation of knowledge. It
Right.
wasn't
Right. As
like
a whole.
a specific story, but when you looked at all the little details that he
Right.
had to overcome, parade permits and all that kind of stuff, just and they were all little diddly garbage things, but every
Hmm.
one of them was a hurdle. You know,
Right.
there was no easy day. He didn't get up on Tuesday and say, today's Tuesday. Everything's going to go great today. He generally
Right.
got up
Yeah.
on Tuesday and said, what are we going to struggle with today?
Yeah,
So
exactly. What's today's problem? First
that's
problem is
right.
going to be. Yeah. Now, you mentioned the research and everything, doing the research and gathering all of these stories, and obviously these are historical facts that you had to uncover and take a look at and read and fact check and everything. Now, when you were doing this and writing the book, having historical facts, but also having a lot of spiritual reflection on the side of Jesus. How did you manage to balance between these two iconic figures as you were trying to deliver your message?
Well, part of it is looking at where do the facts of the two work together, and keeping that in mind is that's part of the overall structure of the book. Is to
Mm,
see how did they complement each other, how did they work, how similar were they, what could we take from it,
right,
but also it was humanizing, looking at Martin Luther King's issues with all of the battles he had
right.
compounded Jesus' issues, because he was fighting laws that kind of were on the fly. I mean, the church could decide, well, maybe we didn't mean that, we mean this.
Right.
So he was sword fighting with the windmill too, not knowing
Exactly.
exactly, which rules am I breaking or what am I trying to do here?
Right. There was no
Uh,
bill to pass.
That's right. I mean, at least Martin Luther King knew the law, and the law
Right.
said no, 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 no. So he knew what the stairs looked like. Jesus,
Right.
the stairs were kind of vague, but when he went in and turned over the money changers in the temple, I think he got undivided attention on that one. Uh,
Absolutely.
and so he said, "I'm here to make a noise," and he
Right.
certainly
I mean,
did.
if
So
Martin figured out a way how to pull out a stack of money out of nowhere, he would have
Right.
the interest of everyone as well. So that could work
Well,
at any time of history, pretty much.
well, that's true. So I guess in that sense, he knew how to use the media of the time, which was word of
Right.
mouth. I'm
Exactly.
sure that didn't take long to get around Jerusalem, that he had, tipped over the money changers' tables. That
Right.
probably was like wildfire. Hey, have you heard about Jesus? Have you heard about that guy called Jesus? Man, he went in and raised hell.
Right. I mean, the money, you wouldn't believe it. The gold, I mean, it's
It was
incredible.
everywhere.
It was everywhere. Now, during the writing process about these two great men, uh, is there a particular moment where you feel like it encouraged you or inspired you to maybe decide, absolutely, I'm finishing this book because this moment, what I've just seen, what I've just uncovered, really inspired me?
Well, I think once you get down the path,
Hmm.
and I had a very good editor, working with a very good editor, so that makes a big difference. My
Right.
first book, I didn't have the same editorial support, but once I got to this book, I had a good editor who could help me on the blocks, because sometimes you just kind of get into a dead end and you say, "Man, I got an
Oh,
idea,
yeah.
but it's not going anywhere." And
Yeah.
with a good editor, an editor can help you think through, talk through uh,
Hmm.
those blocking points.
Yeah.
So part of it was professional support makes a huge difference uh,
Absolutely.
in writing. So I would say, if you're going to write, find yourself somebody who can play editor for you, that can help you
Hmm.
get the Gordian knot untied sometimes.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but once you kind of get with all four books, there was like a moment. It started out as a compare and contrast, and there's like a moment that all of a sudden it starts making sense,
Right.
and you start to get a comfort factor, and things seem to roll a little easier
Right.
because you know where you're going.
Hmm.
Uh, you have some dead ends where you thought you were going,
Right.
but once you get into the Jesus comment, love your neighbor as yourself, period, end of story. There is no comeback to that.
Right. Right.
There's no but.
Yeah.
He just said,
Doesn't
that's
change. You can't
it.
flip it.
That's it. There is no
That's it.
comma but.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. And I mean, blessings to all of our editors out there. I'm a published author myself, and I had an editor, so I know that kind of word and how it works. And, like I said, prayers and blessings and all the good things shall happen to our editors because they are truly
absolutely.
unsung heroes when it comes to authorship and books and writing and everything.
Yes. Yes.
Now, what kind of readers did you have in mind when crafting Constant Courage? Was it written for believers, for seekers, for activists, all the
Well,
above, more?
it was, I wrote the books basically for my son-in-law. My son-in-law is an agnostic.
Right,
Uh, he's very willing to discuss things, but he just has no beliefs.
right,
And so I wrote these four books. He was my target market. So I'm saying 50 somethings, 40,
right,
50 somethings. That's my target market for these books, because during their childhood is when Christianity in the United States disappeared. It disappeared out of schools. It
right.
disappeared from the news. It just disappeared. And
Hmm.
so they didn't have any foundation or anything even they couldn't even complain about it because they
Right.
didn't know about it. So that was the market segment I'm looking at. It was 40 to 50-year-olds, maybe early 60s. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, Mr. Rogers crowd, the
Right.
people who liked Mr. Rogers when he was live. So
Right.
that was my market, because I think they were cheated by in this country, the quote legal system,
Right.
and the rules and regulations that started to channel belief systems out of schools, out of discussions, off the news.
Hmm.
and everything became kind of sanitized. So
Right.
that's who I wrote the books for, because when I talk to people of that era, including my own children, uh,
Hmm.
even though they went to church, uh, once they got to be junior high school and above, it kind of floats away.
Right.
And so their idea of Jesus was still the exalted on the cross, over
Hmm.
there kind of individual, or personage. But they never really looked at Jesus as a person, and they didn't
Right.
understand him as a nice guy, could be a good
Hmm.
neighbor. And so they missed out, I think. When I
Right.
was growing up, we did learn about Jesus as a person, as a nice guy.
Right.
And it
Carpenter and
wasn't
whatnot.
just a deity over there.
Right.
And so it was obviously a different era, but that's who I wrote the book for, was
Right.
basically my children. Uh,
Absolutely. Now, going back to the book itself and the two characters, because you've reminded me about something where you said the laws change and there's institutional resistance kind of also went away. Now, both Dr. King and Jesus Christ stood against powerful systems of oppression. What do you think we
yes.
can learn from, from their stories about the and have the courage in the to face institutional sort of oppression?
Well, I think we're seeing some of it today.
Right,
I know in the U.S. We're having issues in our educational systems, because educational systems have become institutionalized, and nationalized. And so a local school board has less flexibility than it used to have. So
right,
we're starting to see parents now getting more active and more interested in what's going on with their children. And basically, there is a case at our Supreme Court now that says, what rights do parents have? Because the institution of education, K through 12, is that the parents have no rights. That
right,
basically the student is the property of the institution. And it's
mm,
like, whoa, how did we get here?
right,
And so I think we're in the middle of that right now, because we do have this institutional educational system that is
right,
domineering all decision making, and all uh, uh, basically parent-child interactions. They're embedding themselves in between the parents and the children. So we have that struggle going on right now.
right, right. And and so that's as this struggle is going on right now. There is also something to be said about modern day peacemakers and truth tellers as they are named. So do you think that the cost is still the same because the courage to speak the truth has a cost and it always had. Do you
Right.
think that cost is still kind of the same? Do you draw any parallels between their sacrifices and the risks that are being taken by, as I said, modern day peacemakers?
Well, yes. The modern day peacemaker, regardless of which position they're coming from, they're going to have a group of people that disagree with them,
Hmm.
because the peacemaker is generally confronting an issue. And whenever you have the confrontation of an issue, you have the issuers who
Right.
have their side. So while you might not be put to death,
Hmm.
you can certainly be crucified in a lot of other ways, in your
Right.
reputation, in your business. There's a lot of ways that you can be harmed, so to speak. That's
Hmm.
not physical harm, but
Right.
could be economic harm, can be emotional harm. So yeah, whenever you have the courage to stand up, you're putting yourself out there,
Right.
wherever there is, and you don't really know who's going to do what to try to change your mind.
Hmm.
So yeah, it does take courage, and a lot of us, the old saying says, which hill do you want to die on, or which battle do you want to get into?
Hmm.
Pick your battles. So it's kind of like that. I mean, if you're in everybody's face about everything, then you look like a professional troublemaker. But
Yeah, absolutely.
if you have an issue that is truly important to you, and you have the courage to stand up for it, eventually you'll start having followers. The
Hmm.
people just are not willing to speak up, and they'll pull you aside and say, "Go, go." I agree with you, and they'll send you money and they'll support you. But
Hmm.
the vast majority of most people in societies are not willing to get in the front of the parade.
Right,
They'll be part of the parade, but I don't want to be the tip of the spear.
right,
I'd rather be 3 or 4 rows back. And we all have issues like that. Well, I'll support it 3 or 4 rows back. I'm not going to get in the front row on that one because that's not. I don't have that commitment to that particular issue.
right,
So, you know, yeah, you're risking something whenever you stand up against an institution of any kind.
right. And always sticking your neck out and hoping for the best, basically, as you're doing your
Right.
thing. Right. Now, the two figures also had they shared a message of freedom and of love. How do you think their view challenges our view that we have today, both on a personal and on a social level?
Well, I think the first thing is most people, when you use the word love,
Hmm.
uh, it almost rings hollow. I love chocolate.
Right.
It's that kind of love. It's like, oh, okay, you don't.
Yeah.
It's nice, but who cares?
You can have
Uh,
it,
yeah,
but
right.
it doesn't matter if you
Not
don't.
for me. But I think we have to get the meaning back in the word,
Right.
and the meaning gets back in the word by your behavior.
Hmm.
You can say you love somebody, but then if you poke them in the nose, it didn't ring very true. But
Absolutely,
if you
yes.
say you love somebody and you help them,
Hmm.
uh, then your acts are not just words. And I think that's
Right.
where we're not there yet. I think we have palms of friendship and birds of friendship and things,
Right.
but we're really not going to be friends.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm going to go through the motions and I'm going to say I love you as a brother, blah blah. Blah. But if your actions don't follow through, it's
Right.
a hollow word, and that's a shame. But we've gotten ourselves here, so we'll have to figure out how to get ourselves to the next level where it does have meaning. And as I said, meaning is by deeds,
Right.
not by words.
Now, did you share the book with any readers so far?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
actually, I've had feedback, quite a bit of feedback. Some people get a kick out of the titles because they all
right.
compare Jesus to somebody.
Hmm.
And a lot of people said, I would have never thought of that,
Right.
and they said, why did you do that? And I said, so you'd read the book. That was the whole idea, is to get the
I don't know
human
if you know
deity.
how titles function, but that's pretty much.
Right, right. So, I have had several comments
Hmm.
from people who said, I never looked at Jesus as a human
Right.
and having human frailties and being thirsty and hungry, just I mean, just like we are. They
Right.
never looked at him that way. And one woman said to me, she said, I grew up in a very institutionalized religion,
Hmm.
but Jesus was always over there. It was not somebody I wanted to sit and have coffee with.
Right.
And you made Jesus somebody that I would like to sit and have coffee with.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was, hey, score,
Right.
they
Exactly.
got
Yes.
it. They understood.
If you're having coffee with someone, you're willing to listen to them. That's pretty much
That-
like the first step you need, right?
yes, yes.
Yes, sir. If King, if Dr. King and Christ were here today, what message do you think they would most urgently want us to hear?
Boy, I don't. I think the message would be the same. I think the
Mm,
message would be uh, back off the confrontation,
hmm
sit and listen to each other, really love each other, and figure out how to make things work.
Right.
Because if you do have love for people, you can come to conclusions and solutions. But when you show up with animosity and hate,
hmm
uh, you can't start there. And if you start there, it can only go downhill. So
Absolutely.
you have to show up with more of a willingness to listen, willingness to concede, willingness to change. Maybe my beliefs aren't the best beliefs, and maybe I got to change some of my beliefs to make things work. And
Right.
that's okay. I mean, nobody said you can't change. We all
Right.
change life. So I think their message would be the same as it was.
Right.
It's
Right.
just different circumstances.
Absolutely.
But
The people changed, but the conflicts themselves and the issues themselves, they just evolved with the times, but they didn't really change, sort of.
that's right.
Right.
That's right.
So, yeah, and the message remains sort of all encapsulating in what it's trying to deliver.
Yes. And there is a solution out there, but you have to be willing to work at it and have the courage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And have the courage.
Yes.
Thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been quite exhilarating, and I loved our conversation here. And also, I want to thank our listeners. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Bright Words Book Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to pick up a copy of Constant Courage, Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesus Christ by Tracy Emerick on Amazon. We appreciate your support, and we hope you continue to seek knowledge and live with courage. Before I say my goodbyes, I would like to give you also the word and let you say your goodbyes as well.
Well, I thank you for the time, and I think your conclusion was exactly right. Have the courage, have the
Have the
courage of
courage.
your beliefs, and be willing to let your beliefs be modified. And that takes courage. So it's a good foundational word.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Hopefully, maybe you'll write more, and we'll see you more, and we talk to you more.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Goodbye.
You've been listening to the BrightWord Books Podcast, home of the literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss future episodes. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.